Really interesting talk with loads of high-level exploits. You're in the wrong room, so think about that. You can run away now if you want. I will start with the legal bit. We do talk about Bluetooth jamming in the talk. A lot of the premise was around jamming Bluetooth and manipulating Bluetooth. Obviously, that's illegal, so we never did that. But we will talk about the premise. We'll talk about how you can do it, and there's some good videos on YouTube using the same kit. It's readily available for well under $200. But we just kind of proved it was a proof of concept for us. We didn't go the extra mile and end up in prison. And a lot of this talk is a combination of stuff we did as lab research, and it was an amalgamation of 2 red teamings we did for previous customers. We do not encourage breaking the law in any way, shape or form. Blah blah blah. So a little bit about me. I'm Tim Shipp. I'm the CTO and co-founder of Threatlight. I've been leading incident response teams and red teams globally for about 20 years. I'm still a serving major in the British Army Cyber Reserves. So I'm an SME for red teaming and blue teaming for British MOD. I'm looking around because one of my colleagues is hidden in here somewhere, but I can't see him. I've had past cybersecurity roles in Accenture, Cybereason, Symantec, Airbus, Thales, and a few others, and roughly led around 300 breaches in Fortune 500 companies during those 20 years in my career. So this is a very Android-heavy talk. My history with Android, it started in 2007, which is about a year before Android came out as an OS. I was working for Panasonic. We were doing mobile phones, so we were buying Windows mobile phones and Palm Pilots and hacking those, trying to sort of get the ROMs off of HTC devices and put the ROMs onto those devices, so we could see what Android was about, so we could build our applications and get ahead of the game for when it actually launched. Panasonic did release a very pretty soft phone. Their sort of $1,000 flagship IP phone. The Japanese team brought it over to the UK, and within an hour I had Doom on it. They weren't very happy about that. Touchscreen didn't work, so we tried Day of the Tentacle instead, so we could actually use the touchscreen for that. This led to my first trip to Japan. I was sent to Japan as a naughty boy to explain why I'd broken their brand new product and how I'd broken it. And effectively that was my first entry into cybersecurity, and everything basically went downhill from there. So, anatomy of an attack. So this particular customer, we've been working with them for several years. We've done all of the usual spear phishing, smishing. We'd done dead drops. We'd done social engineering. We'd been in with malicious USB keys and all of that. And to be honest, they were really good. And they weren't getting the return on the investment that they wanted, and the guys weren't getting to do as much of the interesting stuff as they would like. So we had a chat with them. We looked at the whole company and how we could do something a bit different, and how we could get some good value for everybody. And it became very apparent that they were doing the type of company they had their own mobile app as part of their product. So they had their own developers, so we thought, well, why let's target the developers. I wasn't allowed to kidnap, so that was out. So the next choice was let's see if we can compromise one of their devices. So the techniques in scope were these sort of standard symmetrical red teaming, which we'd done to death. Physical access, could we clone their cars? Could we tailgate in? Phishing, again, we'd done. User compromise, passive compromise, etc. So the decision was made that we would do passive targeting of the developers, and we would attempt to leverage those developers, because the assumption was they were developers. They were the guys actually writing the code. They probably already had rooted handsets. I don't know if any of you are developers or work with developers. As an incident responder, developers are the bane of my life, because if anyone's going to do weird stuff on a machine, it's a developer. And when you're threat hunting and trying to actually look for a threat, you end up chasing them around. So the possible challenges we had was that, you know, these guys, they had very good corporate security practices. They had good EDR. They had a great SOC. You know, whenever we tried exploitation, you know, and we got access to a system, they would get in very quickly. They cut our CNC, and you know, it was they made us work very hard for our money when we got in to do a job for them. And the biggest limiting factor is we only had kind of 2 weeks to throw this together. We you know, we didn't have 2 months to write some fancy exploit code. It was what we had on the shelves and what we had readily available to us, literally in our pockets. So the possible infection vectors we had is we knew there was a lack of corporate PED policies. You know, it was bring your own device, do what you want with your own device. They were a late stage startup, so you know, they had, you know, everyone was using their own mobile phones, everyone was using their own Bluetooth devices. We did note that the customer had a fleet of company electric cars. They were all Teslas basically, and that was an interesting vector for us. So we had the concept of what if we block the Bluetooth on the Teslas, masquerade as a Tesla, and then when the user tries to connect to their car with their mobile phone, we compromise their device, and then we use that as a way into the environment. So, like I said, the aim was design a service, masquerade as a device, and then exploit the device for further onward travel. So, as it happens, Tesla documents all of their components online. It's very easy to find out exactly where said devices are. So on a Tesla Model 3, which is what these guys had as a company car, there was a module under the Tesla badge on the bonnet and one under the Tesla badge on the rear of the vehicle. Don't know if you've ever seen a card pewter. $25, roughly, well, maybe $30 now. It's basically a Flipper Zero that isn't $200. When I started doing this talk, it was how can we do this? You know, we can compromise a company for $200, because that was roughly what these are. I say these are $30, and I only need 2 of them. And the best bit, magnets. So sticking on the Tesla was nice and easy. That's not as magnetic as I thought it would be. More dramatic normally. So the plan was stick one of these on the front of the vehicle, stick one of these on the back of the vehicle, and then use a flipper with a larger antenna to push the signal and have the user connect to me. So these devices don't have all the technology in them off the bat, so they're $29 for the device, and then with $15 worth of hardware, that goes in there, those go in there, and you've got a Bluetooth jammer with roughly 2 meters effective range. And if you look on YouTube, there is and if you were to Google NRF24 on YouTube, there is a Spanish gentleman demonstrating that exact hardware, and he's actually blocking the Bluetooth in there. So the proposed attack vector was the 2 of these card pewters, one on the front, one on the back, grand total of $95, and then we'd use the Flipper Zero to masquerade as the vehicle. User would connect, and we would push the exploit code to him over Bluetooth. Problems we had: Android 13 and 14 are pretty secure by design. You know, they've come a long way in the past couple of years. If you look at any Android exploit stuff on YouTube, it's all done in virtual machines or like very, very old Android versions. And if you were to try it yourself, you wouldn't get very far. It is very well locked down in their defense. So getting an APK on, it can be done, but they've gone to a lot of effort in preventing malicious APKs. You know, we were able to create one, but that was that was the best part of those two weeks, was trying to create a malicious APK that we could get onto that device without Android just blocking it outright. And also a lot of the exploits that you see for Android, it's just, oh, we'll just use ADB. ADB typically requires you to actually be plugged in via USB, which kind of limits you. Unless you're sneaking behind somebody with a USB cable, it kind of limits the attack vectors. But, we didn't try that. So what's left? Reinvention of the lowest of low-tech solutions. USB rubber duckies have been around since 2010, and it was the old USB stick keylogger where you plug it into a device and it can effectively it masquerades as a keyboard or mouse. So it allows keyboard strokes and mouse inputs in very quick succession. So you can put in you can effectively pump code into it very, very quickly. But we were using this over USB because it's built into the flippers by default, and with a little bit of messing around, we were able to get it working in the little car computers as well. So the plan was USB rubber ducky over Wi-Fi. There's probably a better way of saying that. And we use that to emulate a USB keyboard just to input the button strokes with the intention of getting the user to download and execute a payload. And we did a pretty diagram for it. So attacker blocks Wi-Fi with the car computer. The car effectively is unable to communicate with the phone, and the phone is unable to communicate with the car. So this scenario is user gets into their car after work, wants to put Spotify on, and they can't connect. So it's blocked, and then we push our Bluetooth connectivity to them, and then but instead we compromise the device. And we have a demo. Well, we have a recording of a demo, because there is zero chance of this working in the real world in front of 100 people. Trust me, I've done it. And this was the reason we used the flipper, is because it has this lovely user interface that you can see in the top left. Can you see?
Yeah.
Excellent. So that's just me setting up, going to the relevant app pack and enabling bad USB. So the jamming is effectively done now. The user, with the phone on the right, tries to pair to their Pezler for legal purposes. Now this is massively slowed down. I could get this to happen in a couple of seconds with very little on the user screen, but it makes for a really bad demo. So I've deliberately slowed it down, and when we did it, we actually had it with a black screen overlaid over the top, so that none of this was actually. In fact, we actually had a Tesla badge, so it's pretty transparent to the user. So there's no human interaction from my end. The payload's been sent, and the Metasploit payload has been sent to the device over Bluetooth. And then, in the demo, the Android device is already rooted. In the job that we did, it wasn't, and we had to use our own privilege escalation techniques. Obviously, I'm not going to show you that here because I want to use it again. These ones. Thank you. So that was the easy bit. Metasploit's been around for donkey's years. It is not very well supported or developed on Android anymore. We had to modify some of the code to get it to work. It's been years since it's been updated. We weren't able to enable persistence whilst we were in Metasploit, and Android doesn't like external APKs having outbound connectivity, so you get about 3 minutes, and then Android actually shuts that external connectivity down. So you get to do a bit of enumeration, but like using tools like Droza, there wasn't enough time on keyboard before Android locked it all down. So we needed additional access to get further on in the environment. So in an ideal world, getting remote access via ADB, Android Debug Bridge, was the dream. It would give us a more reliable shell and really allow us to further exploit the environment without having to rely on Metasploit's slightly sketchy code. The downside was ADB is only designed to work over USB or local area network. The local area network was a relatively new feature. It's typically done via USB, via devs. That's how I've always used it. But we need to see if there was a way to bridge that gap. Fortunately, there was. And providing you do have root access to the device, you can just set SE Linux to permissive, and then set enforce to 0, and that's it. You can then effectively use ADB over TCP. So we were able to create a remote listener using Termux. So through ADB we deployed Termux. We set the listener up on port 55555 because why not? And then once we start the service, we were effectively able to create a complete outbound connection from Android Debug Bridge out to our command and control server out in Google. So there's that diagram. The beauty of that is that works over the customer's 3G, 5G, Wi-Fi, whatever network they're on. But when they take that device into the office and they plug that onto the corporate Wi-Fi, we're on the corporate Wi-Fi with a permanent remote shell back to that environment, which was the exact aim that we had. So what we were able to do with that is we had full persistence all of the time. We had all of the things that we could do with ADB anyway. All of the additional, we could modify Android effectively. But what we were doing primarily was we were using things like SOX proxies to allow us to run Nmap. We were able to do all of our enumeration, all of our onward movement into the environment, onto their domain controllers, into their ESXi hypervisors, all through that phone, all from the comfort of my own home at that point. It was. We were also able to get access to the device's user interface as well. So there was a tool called SCRCPY, probably needs a better name. But once you can actually have a remote session with that device and actually control that device, almost remote desktop like. So we had remote desktop to the device to press any buttons if we wanted to interact with any apps on that device. But obviously we had complete remote shell also. So further things that we need. Obviously this demo is very, very loose in the sense it's the bare minimum to get in and get what we needed done. Ideally, moving forward, we'd want a more robust persistence mechanism. We'd want something that would survive a reboot. This is great. We've got a pretty decent reverse shell, but if that device gets rebooted, that's gone. So next steps is we need to move away so that's going to survive a reboot. Obviously, you could see that the APKs were on that user's desktop as well. They're going to see those with their other apps. So we need to hide those APKs, hide those icons. We had a keylogger, so we can keylog harvest credentials. Any usernames, passwords, whatever else. WhatsApp chats, whatever they're doing with that, whatever they're doing with that phone, we'd have access to log all of those. But as I said, the big one for us is we were able to create reverse SSH tunnels and SOX proxies, so that we could effectively connect our proper Kali box up through this device, and do all the things we could have done had we got a real implant into the environments, all through this user's mobile phone. And they didn't like that. So lessons learned. It doesn't need to be clever, novel, pretty, expensive to actually, be a pretty good attack vector. We've spent a lot more money to get a lot less in a red teaming engagement. This was, we said $200. Realistically, it was $90, and we could probably get that down cheaper. So budget is not a blocker where ingenuity exists, and leveraging non-standard approaches, e.g., reverse SSH, can get you a lot further than having to rely on spear phishing and getting a user to click a link and so on and so forth. Anyone have any questions? Yes.
So what if the car started moving? So when you were trying to run the exploit?
So the exploit itself only took a couple of seconds to run, and the worst case was there'd be someone driving around this particular state with two of these stuck to him. So we did think about putting a bit of string on it, so we put it away. But to actually run the exploit, it was literally 30 seconds, and then once it was done, it was just like getting these off the car again was the issue. It wasn't even anything like that. I haven't experimented with what you could do, because you could technically inject the code on the fly. We were just browsing to a website, downloading the APK and running the APK. Could have done a lot fancier things with it.
So what was the solution for that?
Good question. Yeah.
BYOD?
Yeah, have some BYOD policy, have something to monitor devices on those devices, have some standardization. Latest version, EDR, all that good stuff. At the back. Sorry, you'll have to speak up.
What did you accomplish by pivoting to the phone? What your end goal with the red team?
So the end goal was to get into the customer environment and compromise the customer environment. So all of this was just to get a footprint on that customer's network, and then exfiltrate data, escalate privileges, all the stuff you do in a typical red team engagement. But because they had a pretty decent EDR, they had a very good SOC, and they knew we were coming. They would find us pretty regularly. But this was an attack vector where they weren't looking. Like they didn't have EDR on that endpoint, and we were able to bypass a lot of their controls just by going in a completely different attack vector. Yes.
So you specifically went for Android phones. How did you know that the person you were targeting during your actual engagement had an Android?
Because we knew a few of them had Android, a few of them had iPhone. We deliberately picked the Android because the iPhone was too difficult. If I'm perfectly honest.
So did you ask for a list of people that could have an Android, or were you just doing initial reconnaissance beforehand? Or
I was just stood in the car park looking very, very, very indiscreet, and just seeing who had them at who had them at lunch, who had them walking to their vehicles, because everyone walks around with them like this anyway. So you don't have to spend too long there to understand who's going to be your target. But it was done with their knowing as well. So it was kind of always say, right, we're going to use you, and then we'll use a standardized phone rather than take control of his phone, because God knows what he's got on it, and I don't need that in my life. I don't need to see his photos. Yes.
So the person, the car that you stuck them on, they knew that you were doing that, or were you doing secretly putting it on the car and then you had to take it off when they pass by?
The plan was to do it secretly, but it just felt a bit weird. So we kind of explain what we're doing, and then we'd do it to somebody who we were working with, one of their team effectively. Would have loved to have actually done it just crawling around the car park and them not knowing about it, but I think that's how you end up in jail. Yes.
So after you got initial access to the phone and wanted to start pivoting to their environment, did you stay undetected in their environment? So like when you were doing enumeration by nmap against their assets, did they detect you at all in the process? Or no?
Not until we got into the Windows environment. So we were able. So we moved over to Linux. We moved over to the ESXi environment, and had we not gone into AD, then we would have pretty much been undetected. But that wasn't our intent. It was as much to test them as to test us. So we could have stayed undetected for as long as we'd wanted to had we not gone into EDR land. Oh God, yes.
When it comes to the Bluetooth of
Yep.
the actual Tesla, did you guys just clone the name, or did you actually clone the MAC address? I'm asking because there's some paranoid folk that have been like, "Oh, I want to clone the Spotify. It's not working. Let me check it."
Didn't need to clone the MAC address. It was just enough to we could see what the car's name was, and we just cloning that seemed to be enough.
So if a user was paranoid enough and say, "Well, let me just peruse," then you could have been exposed because MAC address.
Absolutely, but so when you sat in your car and you want to go home, you just want Spotify to work, don't you?
I'm gonna be honest. I'm a little paranoid myself, so I tend to tinker a lot and look at stuff like that. So unless you get someone that doesn't do that.
Yeah, and if I was to do this again, it would be a lot more refined, and I'd have a splash screen to hide the really hacky stuff that was going on in the background. But hey, it worked. Yes.
When you were getting remote access devices over the LAN, did the device have to have remote debugging enabled, or did you get in some other way?
Sorry?
Remote debugging. Did
Yes.
the device have to have remote debugging enabled priorly to get in, or did you get in some other way?
So we were just able to enable ADB, and that was enough.
Okay,
And that was it. And then anything we needed to enable, we just did through ADB,
gotcha.
which seemed to do the job. Yes.
Were these like work phones, or were this just like people personal devices? Like, did they have like profiles installed on it, or?
They were pretty much personal devices, so that they were kind of late stage startup. They didn't have corporate devices, so even the developers for the applications, they didn't know. So the majority of them had personal devices, but the people who were doing the applications had Pixels, or they had kind of some generic phones. So that was what we were doing our testing with, a generic phone that was one of their ones that they'd picked to be supported by the application, because they had their own Android app that was part of their platform. Anybody else?
What was the kind of ultimate learnings for the customer? Actually, did they add in a BYOG policy, or was it more like because you laterally moved the VMware architecture, things like that, it took the time to understand that more than the phone aspect?
So one of the recommendations was to have some form of monitoring on your end devices, on your phones, and that was the main.
They didn't bother to look at laterally move to the Linux machine, or how to protect the Linux machine that you access as well after the Linux.
Well, yeah. It just so happens that that's what my company does. So. So we specialise in protecting Linux devices. So they use our Linux detections now, our Mac detections, because that's what we do well. Yes.
So after you got your initial foothold in the environment, getting off the phone, when you were enumerating the network, were you just kind of blasting pings to see what was live, or were you more discreet with trying to isolate specific IPs to not alert anything?
So initially we were being very discreet. So we were doing very low level sort of scanning. We were tunneling Bloodhound and whatnot for it as well for a point. But then as the investigation as it dragged on, we did a lot more noisy things. It was more of a purple team than a red team, if I'm honest. So we kind of split it. So as the week went on, we sort of upped the ante and made it louder and louder and louder. Yes.
So out of curiosity, I know you probably tell Tesla what you did.
No. we didn't do anything to Tesla. No Teslas were hurt in the making of. It just so happened that was what it had, and it's any Bluetooth module you place that within 2 meters of, it just gets jammed. So it's not the Tesla wasn't at fault. It just happened to be the electric vehicle of opportunity. Any other takers? Yes.
So would an MDM, you mentioned endpoint monitoring, would an MDM company solution have prevented you from being able to move off of the phone into the Linux environment, or would it not have made a difference?
I think something on the mobile device would have been able to stop it. I mean, we were very obviously doing things we shouldn't have been doing on that phone. And the ADB making an outbound connection to the internet is I don't think that's seen very often. So that would be a very easy indicator for something pretty sketchy going on. Or just Android devices connected to Linux devices in general over IP would have been a weird one. So there's plenty of opportunities to see us, but nobody's looking.
Yeah, I guess that would be the first place you thought.
Exactly. Yes.
You mentioned that the Android application would close your connection when you first did the attempt. How
Yeah.
did you get the reverse shell to stay open long enough to be able to do the enumeration to the application on the phone when you were proxying?
So that was why we needed the ADB. So when we were able to get the APK in and get the Metasploit shell, we had 3 minutes, and then we had three minutes to get everything in place to then open ADB and then get that next shell, because Android would just close it down. And that was a couple of tests. And are they onto us? I keep losing my shell. No, it was actually just Android doing a good job. Yes.
Are you able to say what the recommended solution to that problem would have been?
Which part?
How to not be vulnerable to this attack.
It's a difficult one because there was so many components to it, and I think like Android had done a lot of good work with preventing you installing malicious APKs. Like that was the hardest part of the whole thing, was getting an APK that would actually run, and you can see in the demo it still whinges that you're running a sketchy APK, and you have to I agree to run this malicious APK. But I think in the very latest sort of in 15, I think they've improved that even further. Any more? We got one in the back. Yeah. So just through Android. Not to my knowledge. We just enabled it and that was that. Yes.
Is that a common blind spot that you see where you won't trip off any alarms if you're staying in the Linux and virtualization environment versus hitting Windows?
So much so I built a company around it. So yes, like what we see with many ransomware attacks and whatnot now is they're coming in through web shell or a VPN exploit. They're going straight to Linux, straight to ESXi, and they're just ransomware down from the hypervisor. They don't touch Windows because EDR is hard, and if you can avoid it, and that's what we're seeing on a weekly, monthly basis now. So we focus on Linux detections now because that's our main battle space.
Thanks.
Any more? Yes.
Is there any recommendations on the network level side of things versus, say, a production network from
Yeah, I mean, not having corporate Wi-Fi is a difficult one to say. But yeah, decent VLANing would have been enough. Yeah, so some segregation, so mobile phones and company laptops were completely VLANed off, and then you could have something upstream to prevent them from being able to get further up the network. I think that's it. Well, thank you for listening. I'm going to take a photo if you don't mind, because that's a terrifying number of people to have in one room.